We can now confirm almost certainly that the Ukrainian defense in a key part of Donetsk is falling apart. And it's happening right now as we speak. Now, as I'm recording this, it's falling apart piece by piece. There are Ukrainian soldiers who no longer know where to go. Some have to run away, but it's about to get worse, at least in this particular direction. Let's look at the maps now and you'll be able to see for yourselves how Russia has already divided one of these two significant towns for the Ukrainian defense along the entire Donetsk front. Because of these small advances, which have been increasing more and more in recent days, as you know, I'm currently in Donbass. That is, I'm reporting to you directly from the scene, and here I try to provide you with information that you won't find elsewhere. So there are some areas of the front that seem especially important to me, which the Russian military and I are monitoring with special interest. I keep asking them questions so they can explain everything to me, and then I can pass this information on to you. Now we're talking about Pakrovsk-Mirnagrad. Actually, regarding this, recently, I already gave you a pretty interesting report about sabotage and reconnaissance groups that were working there. And I specifically conveyed to you what the Russian soldiers told me. There they said that the situation in Ukraine is really critical because it seems that the armed forces of the Russian Federation, you have all the images and all the explanations in that report, they are roaming freely. Well, it seems like they're not afraid of encountering the enemy. And indeed, after the capture of the towns of Novoekonomichesk on one side and Svirove on the other, we're talking here about one preceding the entry of the Russian Federation troops into Mirnagrad and the other into Pakrovsk. And you can see for yourselves on the map that it's like a semicircle that's already forming around both towns, which ultimately represents a very important cluster, a fundamental strategic hub. Even if it were only in terms of the number of soldiers currently in that territory, which is semi-surrounded by the Russian Federation. But I'll go further. You have these images, the full footage of how the capture of Novoekonomic took place. I won't be able to publish them here, so I'll leave them on my Telegram channel, Liusivaya or Alusivaya, all together, just like the rest of my social media. Here you can see those troops of the Russian Federation with that Russian Federation flag that they're holding. Those soldiers who just, according to Russian language, the town in question should be liberated, right? But when we look at the map, be careful, especially when we're talking about the town of Pakrovsk, because right now, at this very moment, practically in real time, advances are being made by these sabotage and reconnaissance groups, which I told you about in this report from a couple of days ago. And surprise, they have been infiltrating because, and this is according to Ukrainian sources themselves, at one point a Ukrainian unit had to withdraw from combat basically because they ran out of personnel. And that made things much easier for Russia. They tried to fix the situation, but as you can see, it wasn't possible, at least not completely. They advanced very quickly and now they're organizing themselves inside the town. This is causing the Ukrainian troops inside to become divided entirely. You can already see it on the map, which in turn makes the defense of the town tremendously complicated. Therefore, this is one of the two main centers of this area of the front as well. Because that part of Donetsk, precisely, we call it Pakrovsk-Mirnagrad. Russia has already reached the outskirts of Mirnagrad, according to my sources. The same thing has happened with the town of Pakrovsk, where those loose sabotage and reconnaissance groups have now clearly become what we all call The Russian army is at the gates on the outskirts and is already starting direct fighting in Pakrovsk. This happened when we were there for a couple of days. These last few days have been especially tense, monitoring the situation on the front. Of course, my sources told me, remember, they're military, so they mostly talked to me about tactics and military strategy. They told me, if right now, if we manage to control the towns of Zbiriba on one side, and on the other side, Novelka Demicheske, the Ukrainian defense has practically fallen. We can't be absolutely certain, but almost 99% sure has fallen. And from there, the definitive disaster for the Kiev regime will begin. In the Donetsk front, in particular Konstantinovsk, because it's all a single Donetsk front. Now we're talking about the part that's further south, then it goes to Konstantinovsk, and it's precisely in Konstantinovsk where things aren't going particularly well for Ukraine either. It opens the door for the troops of the Russian Federation to that key conglomeration. And it's already, without a doubt, the Slavyansk and Kramatorsk conglomeration, which would in turn close the door to the recovery of the Donetsk People's Republic for Ukraine, and therefore would already open the door for Russia. To be able to say that the Donetsk People's Republic has already been completely liberated, which is one of the fundamental objectives, one of the first and most important ones for the Russian Federation in the entire special military operation. Ukraine is not doing well politically either because Zelensky is under pressure. On one hand, supposedly a Ukrainian society, which I already explained to you when we discussed this topic in previous reports, is really significantly influenced, not to say subsidized, because of course I can't state this categorically, by the West directly, by the United States in particular. On the other hand, Western politicians have also put pressure on him. Even Ursula von der Leyen has spoken about this directly, openly. So it seems that Zelensky is going to back down and has already confirmed that. I understand that this will be confirmed on Monday. But he is indeed preparing a law that will reverse the law they just passed. Where those two anti-corruption agencies, right, which he wanted to take away from them, well, in the initial law he took away their powers, and now he is preparing a law that I think will practically return all those powers to them. And that way, put an end to it once and for all. The issue of popular discontent, you could say Western discontent. But I would tell you, put an end once and for all to the issue of Ukraine's independence. Because, as you know, it has been proven countless times. And this one could be said to be final, right? That neither the Kiev regime nor Vladimir Zelensky himself, nor therefore the country they are supposed to lead, right? They can't do absolutely anything. Without the collective West, they can't make any decisions outside of Western wishes either, and that's something that will end up being very bad for Ukraine. I'm going back to the situation on the front. What is happening in one part, a very important part, mind you, of the Donetsk direction is really the prelude to what will eventually happen. I don't care if it's tomorrow, in a few weeks, or in a few months. In every part of the front, of course, at a different time, but eventually it will happen along the entire Ukrainian front. Whether Ukraine wants it or not, whether the West wants it or not, whether Donald Trump likes it or not. And therefore that Ukraine remains involved in this conflict that only matters to the West. Some of the actors in that collective West don't even know why anymore. And they themselves have never really known. But if the Ukrainian state were even a little bit independent, would it care even just a little about its own people? Here, with this situation on the map, it's already reaching a critical point more than ever. I mean, it's perfectly clear what the outcome will be. Of course, they would try to negotiate and reach an agreement as soon as possible to avoid losing more men, to avoid losing more territory, and I would say to avoid losing more sovereignty. But well, that's been practically lost since the beginning, and if not from the beginning, at least since 2014.